This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just get started. First question comes from Sin729, and Sin asks this question, a pretty long one, but ever since 2014, if you want to count Deshaun Watson, every QB who won the Heisman or came close to it are currently starters in the NFL. Based on this, will Dylan Gabriel be a starter anytime soon or at all? I'm sorry, Sin, but I'm going to have to challenge the premise of your question, right? The premise that you're setting up, which is every quarterback since 2014 that's almost won the Heisman Trophy has been a pretty good quarterback in the NFL, a starting caliber quarterback. I have to call that out as bullshit. And here's how I will prove it is bullshit. We'll go from 2023 to 2014. I have a list right here in my hand of the Heisman Trophy candidates, and I'll point out quarterbacks who are in the top 10 of voting who were not starting quarterbacks. So 2023, number 5 in Heisman voting was Jordan Travis. He's not a starting quarterback. 2022, Max Duggan, number 2 in Heisman voting that year. The runner-up, I mean, he came closer than Dylan Gabriel did. Dylan Gabriel last year came in 3rd in Heisman voting. So Max Duggan, 2 in Heisman voting. He starts for the St. Louis Battlehawks, who, you know, are going to play in a fun playoff game in the UFL this Sunday that I'm going to be locked in for, but not a starter on the NFL team. Stetson Bennett, number 4th in Heisman voting that year. I think he's still on the Chargers. Hendon Hooker, number 5. Not really sure if Hendon Hooker is still in the league. We'll continue. In 2021, this is the ironic part of this, Kenny Pickett was number 3 in Heisman voting, the same spot that Dylan Gabriel was in 2024. 2020, Mac Jones was 3rd in Heisman voting, again, the same spot that Dylan Gabriel was in, not a starter anymore. Kyle Trask was number 4. Never really even got the opportunity to start. Justin Fields in 2019 was number 3. He technically starts, but is not the caliber of quarterback I would call a definite starter. 2018, rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. Will Greer, number 4. Gardner Minshew, number 5 in Heisman voting in 2018. It's funny to think of, but doesn't Gardner Minshew feel much older than coming out in 2018? Still, or maybe 2018 is just farther along ago than I would like to admit to myself. Mason Rudolph, yes, 2017 Heisman finalist, number 7 in the voting that year. 2016, Jake Browning, backup quarterback, number 6 in the Heisman voting that year. 2015, Keenan Reynolds out of Navy. He was a really fun college player to watch. Unfortunately, did not have a NFL career at the quarterback position. I do believe he played defensive back for a couple of years. Number 5 in Heisman voting. And Trevon Boykin, number 4 in Heisman voting out of TCU in 2014. So the premise of the question is just flawed. Not every quarterback, and not even close to every quarterback who has become a Heisman finalist, has ended up becoming a starter in the NFL. And that's just obvious based on the numbers of it all. Look, if you like Dylan Gabriel, it should be about things that Dylan Gabriel does on the field instead of accolades that he's accomplished, right? When I talk about what I like with Shedeur Sanders, I'm bringing up stuff that I like about his tape. And I think that's where the conversation should be best be focused in order to be productive about the quarterback position and you know, who may or may not have a chance based on what thing that they do or do not do. And where a player places in Heisman Trophy voting, I'm just going to have to be honest with you, is very irrelevant to what their career is going to be unless they win the Heisman Trophy. Like maybe that can be more swaying. Like Heisman Trophy winners of the last 10 years have definitely had a pretty strong track record, right? You got Joe Burrow in there. I think Tua won the Heisman one year. I'm not confident about that. Derrick Henry has won the Heisman. Like if you go back and look at the Heisman winners of the last 10 years, I think there's something to be said there. But if we're just talking about people, and this is what you said, people have every single quarterback who's won the Heisman or have come close to winning the Heisman. Once you add come close to that, then I think that just completely breaks down as a metric. Now, it is funny to watch because for the longest time, the Heisman Trophy had a bit of a curse associated with it, which was like there was no good quarterbacks in the NFL that won the Heisman. Like it seemed like that award seemed to elude the best quarterbacks in the NFL for whatever reason. Cam Newton was like the first guy who won the Heisman and was really, really good immediately in the pros. And then after that, there was like the floodgates opened, right? I mean, Johnny Manziel won the Heisman. That obviously didn't work out, but then Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, right? Like guys who were consistent starters who also won the Heisman Trophy. So yeah, if you win it at the quarterback position, that does mean something, right? If Cade Klubnik wins the Heisman next year and, Clemson's the number one team in the country and they have some incredible wins under their belt and they roll through the playoffs and win a national championship, he's going to be the number one overall pick. But coming close to winning the Heisman Trophy and not even being runner-up, we're talking about Dylan Gabriel, who was third in voting last year. It doesn't move the needle for me at all. Doesn't move the needle. But hope you understand why it doesn't move the needle. I feel like I was very detailed with that. Luke says, Q, what are your thoughts on the new stadium? You may have already made this known, and I may have missed it. But if not, what is my stance on it? I'm not really too picky. I grew up in Cleveland, so I understand why some people are upset about downtown Cleveland not having the Cleveland Browns. Because the truth about downtown Cleveland, at least the truth that I remember from when I was there, I've not lived in downtown Cleveland ever in my life. I've lived in the area surrounding downtown Cleveland. There's not really much there other than the sports teams, right? Like there's a couple of, really popular clubs and some bars there, but there's not a lot of it. There's not much of an ecosystem in downtown Cleveland. And the Browns leaving that ecosystem is going to disrupt what already is a poor ecosystem down there. I think it is possible to have a thriving downtown area in a city the size of Cleveland without having it be so centered around sports teams. There are multiple areas in the city of Cleveland that have gotten it going, right? There's areas on the west side, Tremont, right? Lakewood. There's a lot of different places where people tend to gravitate to do stuff in Cleveland that aren't downtown. And I think that's because for whatever reason, the businesses downtown, the city itself has done a poor job of making downtown Cleveland an attraction outside of the sports teams that inhabit it. And they're in a rare situation where they have all three of their sports teams based in their downtown area. I personally think that the Browns leaving downtown can be an opportunity for the businesses down there and the leadership in downtown to refocus how they attract people to that area of town. Because when it's only people come down for the sports teams, what you end up having is a ton of parking lots, a ton of parking garages, and really nothing else to do. And I think that's one of the big problems with downtown Cleveland. So I honestly am not opposed to the Browns leaving downtown. I know that in the immediate aftermath of the Browns leaving, there's going to be, some economic pain for a lot of businesses, and some of these businesses aren't going to be able to survive it, to be honest with you, the Browns leaving, especially if they're already on thin margins right now, with especially the economy is the way it is. So I understand why it's a tough situation, but I do think that the city of Cleveland and the downtown leadership of Cleveland has relied on the downtown area being useful because of the sports teams for far too long, and maybe removing that crutch can get them to have a better downtown area, because I've been to other cities that don't have sports teams in their downtown area and have a thriving downtown scene. Cities much smaller than Cleveland. There are parts of towns and bigger cities that don't have sports teams that are able to have a pretty vibrant local economy that's not so surrounded by because its proximity to the arenas. And I think that also leads to a lot of bad businesses forming when, they're basically able to be successful because they're close to a stadium and not because they're offering something that you legitimately want. Yeah, I think that downtown, they should have had this wake-up call when LeBron left, and they went through the economic strife that they went through when LeBron left. But downtown really needs to find more ways to be appealing to people other than like, hey, let's go down there for the game, because I don't think that's the healthiest thing in the long term for that downtown area. Like, I think that it can survive without those teams, and honestly, I think downtown needs to figure out a better way to attract people to it, because you're getting a bunch of people for 8 Sundays a year to come down to Cleveland, or 80 games a year, and you're still going to get the Guardians down there and the Cavs. But what's going to get me to come to downtown on a Tuesday night or for my birthday, right? Like, most people, if you know people from Cleveland, they don't spend their birthday downtown. They go to other places in the area of the city that they're closest to, because downtown's just not that attractive of an option, So I think that part plays a role in that. I know if you clicked on this video, you probably wanted football and not a deep dive into the local economics of the Cleveland sports scene. But yeah, I really do think that's a underestimated thing. And look, I'm not caping for Jimmy Haslam. I don't think Jimmy Haslam's a good guy in this scenario. He wants to build a dome and an area around the dome because he wants to own all of the real estate and money. And he's probably going to do some pretty sleazy stuff when it comes to parking and prices and taxes and how he obtains that money. I'm not expecting that to be a whole good guy thing, and the dome's just going to be a net positive for the city. But if I'm looking for how the city can find something productive, how the people in the city can find something productive out of this whole situation, because it feels like that dome is being built, whether the city wants it there or not. I would, if I were them, focus on okay, let's pivot here. Let's figure out how we can make downtown Cleveland not so reliant on sports teams, because it feels like we're one of the least creative downtowns in the Midwest. I think Detroit has better ideas to get people downtown than Cleveland does, unfortunately. And I think that Chicago, obviously a lot easier in Chicago. They're a much bigger city. But, you go across the Midwest, and I think these places have more attractions downtown than Cleveland. There's not even a grocery store in downtown Cleveland. I find that crazy, right? It's just all of these businesses downtown are so reliant on people coming to the game. And I think that there should be something more interesting. Tower City is just the worst mall you've ever been to. It has a rainbow in it. Nobody wants to shop at Rainbows, right? That you get roasted for wearing clothes at the places that Tower City sells clothes from. It's not a Foot Locker. It's not a Lids. It's not anything there. If I'm downtown Cleveland, you got to have some shopping stuff there, have an outdoor mall or something there. Really make it attractive for people to decide they want to go downtown, or, other than just you got the game there. Look at what other cities are doing, because, the city's throwing this big temper tantrum around the Browns leaving because they don't really have any other way to attract people from downtown. And I'm sympathetic to that, but also, let's be real here. There should be more reasons to go downtown other than seeing the game. That's not the case for every other city in America. And oftentimes, these cities don't have the crutch of having these sports teams. So, yeah, I think it's time for the downtown Cleveland, the leadership there, to pivot and to figure out just how they're going to attract more things to get people downtown other than just the Browns, because I think they'll be better off if people wanted to come to downtown during the week versus 8 Sundays a year. So that's my 2 cents on it. I know it was a much larger chunk of the video than I was anticipating, but guess I had a lot to say on it. Nathaniel says, can you paint a picture of what these rookies would need to do in order for the Browns to pass on a quarterback in the draft next year? I think there are two parts to this, and I've talked about it before. The first part to this is what the rookie quarterbacks do this year. And to your point, if Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel end the season, let's say they play 8 games, they win 3 of them or 4 of them, so they go close to 500 or 500, and the Browns have a success rate around 47 in passing, right? 47%. Then I think that'd be enough to say, hey, I need to see more out of those guys, right? Because that's more than mediocre quarterback play at that point. I think that answers the first part of it. The second element of this question is independent of what these quarterbacks do during the season. And that is, what's going on in college football with these quarterbacks? Is this going to be a draft class where there's 3 guys you can't miss on, and you got to get one of them, and you have the picks to get one of them? If that's the case, right, let's say Lenore Sellers turns into Cam Newton, let's say Drew Aller turns into Andrew Luck, and let's say Cade Klubnik look like Joe Burrow. It's not likely, but let's say we're in that scenario, and the Browns have either because Jacksonville loses a bunch of games or the Browns only win games late. For whatever reason, they have an opportunity to get one of those picks, to get one of those quarterbacks. It's not going to matter what Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders do. They're going to take that quarterback, and Shedeur and Dylan will become bridge quarterbacks. So some of this matters only if the Browns aren't in a position to take a generational quarterback. Outside of that, right, let's say there's no generational quarterbacks in this draft class, so nothing's really enticing you to move off of Shedeur Sanders. You don't see anybody in the draft who you feel like has a better ceiling than Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel, right? Then the Browns will not take a quarterback. But it's going to be more about the quarterback class that emerges over the 2026 college football season than it's going to be about what these guys, what kind of numbers Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel puts up, because it's just going to be about how good these prospects are and how much of a chance do you have to draft them. Because like if let's say you drafted Tua, right? But the next year Joe Burrow's available, and I know they were in the same draft class, but just walk with me here. If you have a player who's Tua caliber on your roster, but you got the opportunity to take Joe Burrow, I'm going to draft Joe Burrow. Not every time. I'm going to draft. I know I got Tua right now, and I can get a guy that's pretty nice next to him. No, I'm going to just get Joe Burrow. Because the difference between having a team quarterbacked in the second and third contract, especially by Joe Burrow versus Tua, is massive, right? Shedeur might be in a situation where he's a good quarterback, but he's the kind of quarterback that starts to become more of a burden the more you have to pay him. You know what I mean? But if you see somebody coming up that you think can be an MVP candidate at the position, well, it don't matter how much you pay them. Nobody cares how much Joe Burrow makes. Nobody cares how much Lamar Jackson makes. Nobody cares how much Pat Mahomes makes. So it really comes down to that. What kind of potential are we seeing out of these guys? What kind of ceiling do we think that these guys have on the roster? And comparing that to what's coming out in the 2026 class. Thank you for the question, though, Nathan. Next one comes from Luke. Luke says this. What's up, Kip? What will Harold Fanon's role be in this offense? Will he be a top 4 threat in this offense? Jerry Jeudy will be the 1. David Njoku will be 2. Cedric Tillman, because of how offense is structured, will be 3 if he's the second wide receiver out of camp. And then if we're just talking about passing offense, then yeah, Harold Fanon will be 4. But if we're structuring this based on like what the Browns want to use on offense, then you got to factor in running back. So it would be Jerry Jeudy would be the 1 option. Then probably you would want to get Quincy about 200 touches, right? So it's 2. And then David Njoku, then Cedric Tillman, than Harold Fainin. I think Harold's probably going to get at most about 100 targets this year. So I think he'll slot in like the top 5 or 6 of offensive touches this year. So that's where I think he'll be in the offense in year one. I think that's a good role for him in year one, right? You know, the development is important there. Do you think Carson Schlesinger starts week one or slowly grooves into the starting role? I think the only player who's definitely shooting, put it in Sharpie, he's going to start week one if he's healthy, is Quincy Judkins. That to me seems obvious. Don't see anybody who could start over him at this point. Even if somebody starts over him, he will have the most carries in week one if he's healthy. So Quincy's the only one I look at like he has to start right away. Mason is, you would hope Mason's going to be ready by week one, but also it's an interior defensive lineman in the NFL. Those things take time, right? It's a hard transition from college to the NFL. It's going to take a lot of just physical growth that he's not going to be able to prepare himself for. So maybe his quickness gets him by, but that limits the amount of reps you can have. And the Browns have a ton of veterans they can play while they bring him along. So I don't expect that to be the case for like a Mason Graham. Carson Schlesinger, again, another situation where I think eventually he will step in, be the starter, be really good. But there's a lot of vets in front of him right now, and they're going to probably slow play him into his role because they have the ability to do so, which when it comes to running back, that's the one position where I'm like, they have no ability to slow play it with Quincy Judkins. What are they going to do out there? Start Pierre Strong? Like, they got to play Quincy. And that's kind of the point with drafting him. Daryl says, how possible is it that Sanders isn't really good at the whiteboard or in the classroom? Is it possible that's why he fell or not getting first team reps? He may be a real project as far as protections and diagnosing defenses. I don't think that's why he's not getting first team reps. He's just not getting first team reps because whether you agree with Shedeur Sanders being a 5th round pick or not, whether you think the reasons were legitimate for Shedeur Sanders being a 5th round pick are legitimate or not, the reality is that the Browns valued Shedeur Sanders as a 5th round pick. That is the resource that they spent to get Shedeur Sanders on this roster, which means that, especially in OTAs, they're going to treat him like a 5th round pick. And usually 5th round picks don't get a ton of first team reps in OTAs. That's why he's not getting OTA first team reps. It really ain't that deep. Shedeur Sanders can get to camp, have a good week of camp, and he'll get first team reps. It ain't that deep. I know people are making it the deepest thing in the world. It really ain't that deep. He will get those first team reps when they are ready to give him those first team reps. There's really no reason to rush it. We're nowhere near close to starting the season. We're not even at the point to where we're seriously preparing for the season. We got a whole lot of time. So I don't think that has anything to do with it. Now, why he fell? Was it because of his whiteboard stuff or the classroom stuff? I don't know, man. There's so many conflicting stories for why Shedeur Sanders fell, right? You'll listen to one anonymous source tell it, and Shedeur Sanders had his feet on the table and he was throwing his money around and he slapped the owner with money and he was acting like a Dave Chappelle skit. In those meetings, you ask somebody else and they were like, Shedeur was completely fine in those meetings. You ask Dion and Dion swears that Shedeur was prepared and they prepared him properly for all of this stuff. The more and more this goes on, the more likely I feel like it is that people brought their own perceptions into meeting Shedeur and just interpreted everything he did massively different from how Shedeur probably interpreted it, right? You ever see, there's like an episode of Fresh Prince, and I hope everybody in the audience has watched at least one run through of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But there's an episode of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. There's also an episode like this of A Different World. But I think more people, unfortunately, have seen Fresh Prince of Bel-Air over A Different World, even though I think A Different World's a better show. That's a whole nother argument for a whole nother day. But Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, there's this episode where Will throws a pool party with Carlton and Uncle Phil takes him to court and everybody's sharing their story and they're telling the same story, but from two different perspectives. And, depending on who's telling the story, some details are different. I think that's kind of just what happened with Shador. Some people went into this just knowing Shador was going to be an asshole, right? And that the Sanders family were going to be assholes. And anything they did, that they could slightly interpret as him being an asshole, they probably blew out of proportion. And I'm pretty sure the Sanders family thinks that they were just complete angels in this whole thing, did nothing wrong, and they can't see why somebody dislikes them. And that's probably not an accurate portrayal of what happened. What probably went down was that Shador was probably, he was Shador about it all. Shador is kind of a laid-back guy, really nonchalant, not the most, he's vocal, but he's not like super traditionally articulate, but I think he's smart. Like, he's a smart guy, but he doesn't pontificate. Right, he's not me or Stephen A. Smith. Well, I'm gonna just use these big ass words for no reason. Shador is very low key. He's not gonna do all of that. And I think that might have rubbed people the wrong way. Maybe he wasn't as prepared as he could have been, and that rubbed people the wrong way. I think it's just a thing of perception at this point and why he fell. And that perception clearly even affected the team that drafted him because the Browns took a quarterback before him. So something was up. I don't think it was nothing, but I don't know if it was something that we should just read too much into. I'm going to give it a clean slate. Just let Shador earn his way to the starting role because I think eventually he will earn his way to the starting role. But I also don't want him to be rushed to that starting role. So it doesn't seem like he has whiteboard issues or classroom problems. I wouldn't imagine that he has whiteboard issues or classroom problems as much training as he's been through. Maybe he's not like amazing in the whiteboard or in the classroom, right? Some quarterbacks excel at that. Like Dylan Gabriel is probably off the charts in the whiteboard or in the classroom. But that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's guaranteed to be a good quarterback. There's a lot of backup quarterbacks who are really good on the whiteboard, right? So yeah, I'm so over talking about the Shador slide, man. I did like 8 videos on it. I broke it down from like a bunch of different perspectives. At the end of the day, I just don't think it was really that deep. Like, I think this was just a combination of group shenanigans, right? I think Shador was probably, his camp valued him at a higher level than what NFL GMs did. And I think NFL GMs, they didn't have a good taste in their mouth about this whole thing with him. And they kind of brought that into their meetings, and those things combined and led to whatever happened in the draft with him. But I wouldn't say that means he's bad in the classroom. I think that's kind of unfair. There's nothing to suggest that he's a bad classroom player. I mean, his play style certainly doesn't suggest that. He plays a traditional pocket style. You would have to imagine he's pretty decent in the classroom for how he plays football. So I think that's an unfair assumption. I dropped Brown. Okay, bro. All right, man. I'm not reading names for the rest of the video because of that. If Dylan Gabriel somehow miraculously winds up as QB1, will the Browns have a choice to make which side DeLon Jones ends up playing? Because this could be such an emphasis on Dylan getting first-team reps he's received so far. No, I don't think it matters. I think DeLon's going to play the left side, and I think that no matter who's the quarterback, and I think that Jack Conklin's going to be the right tackle. And honestly, like, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because they're both really tall. DeJuan's like 6'8". Jack Conklin's like 6'6". So, I mean, Dylan's going to have to throw over somebody who's, close to 8 inches taller than him anyways. Like, it's just going to be what it is. So, I don't think moving DeJuan would make a ton of sense. Like, Dylan's going to have to find passing lanes if the guy's 6'6", if the guy's 6'8". Either way, they way taller than him, right? Like, he's going to have to find a passing lane either way. And I don't think it particularly matters who's the blindside protector in that situation if you trust both tackles. Justin says, what are your thoughts about the training staff getting fired? I've been saying this for years with all the injuries. So they didn't exactly get fired, but they had a lot of people. There was a lot of firings that happened. There were some promotions, a reshuffling of the Browns training staff. And I think it's warranted. A lot of the injuries that the Browns had this year were like people were coming back from injury and then having complications after they came back from injury. From talking to Tyvis Powell, who played in the NFL, that seems like a tall tale sign that your training staff might be a little funky. And I'm glad they made the move. You know, way to read it out there. Luke says, Andrew, bro, I'm tired. Aaron Rodgers scare you now that he's going to Pittsburgh? No, doesn't. It's been a long time since Aaron Rodgers has made a football team better. Like, maybe he'll make the Steelers better this year, but the Green Bay Packers were under 500 his last year there. They were worse in New York with him than they were without him, and Green Bay was also better without him than with him. Even starting a first-year starter in Jordan Love the year after they got rid of Aaron Rodgers. So I just don't think he's at the point of his career where he's going to make a football team better. Will he have some fun moments? Absolutely. Aaron's going to have a couple of games where he's going to look like Aaron Rodgers and you're going to get excited, right? Like that happened with Jets fans last year. I remember texting my one friend who's a Jets fan and, you know, basically being like, man, I think you guys got a quarterback because Aaron Rodgers looked really good in a Thursday night game. And then, you know, the rest of the season happened. So, yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers, he's going to look like a 40-year-old quarterback at times. He's going to look like Aaron Rodgers at times. But it's not really different than what the Steelers have had at quarterback since Big Ben's retired. And honestly, since the last 2 years of Ben. Like, if we go back all the way to 2018, the Steelers quarterback play has been on that same mediocre level, and I expect it to be in that same mediocre range that it's kind of always been in. It's not really different. They're not a different team to me. That's going to be it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.